All right. Well, this morning we are going to be walking through Philippians chapter 1. We summarized verses 1 and 2 yesterday morning, and so this morning we're going to pick up in verses 3 through 8 that really kind of begin the heart of the letter for Paul. So Philippians 1, 3 through 8, I'm going to read through that, and then we're going to break it down and talk about it together. Paul writes this: I thank God in all my remembrance of you, always offering prayer with joy in my every prayer for you all, in view of your participation in the gospel from the first day until now. For I am confident of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you will perfect it until the day of Christ Jesus. For it is only right for me to feel this way about you all, because I have you in my heart, since both in my imprisonment and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel, you are partakers of grace with me. For God is my witness, how I long for you all with the affection of Christ Jesus. I'm excited about this text this morning. I think it's timely in light of what we're enduring as a society, and I think you'll find it encouraging as we begin to break this down. So again, Paul is opening his letter here, and he opens with kind of some exhaustive comments about his prayers that he has been offering for the Philippians. He says, I thank my God in all of my remembrance of you. He particularly identifies that he's constantly remembering the Philippians. He says, I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always offering prayer with joy in my every prayer for you all. You see all those exhaustive terms that continually pop up. Paul clearly continually remembers the Philippians, and every time that he remembers them, he's praying for them. He's praying for all of them. But he gives us a specific statement in here that I think is helpful. His prayer that he's offering, he says in verse 4, he's always offering prayer, that prayer is with joy. Paul is not just praying for the Philippians, but the prayer that he is praying is both constant and joyful. So Paul leads off in the book of Philippians with his comments here, and he tells them that he's offering constant and joyful prayer. That constant and joyful prayer is kind of what kicks off this whole section, and it determines the rest of what he's going to say as he's going to pick up off of those first two verses. So we read verses 3 and 4 and recognize that Paul is continually praying for the Philippians. He's praying for all of the Philippians continually, and he's doing it with joy. He's happy. He's joyful about the Philippians, and he's going to explain why. In verses 5 through 8, the question is, how do these verses feed what we've already seen in verses 3 or 4? And I think what we're going to find is that Paul is answering the question, why? Why is this joyful and constant prayer necessary? Why does he offer it? And that's kind of the key question that he's answering through the rest of his text. So why is it that he offers constant and joyful prayer? Well, he begins to answer that in verses 5 and 6. He says, I'm offering this constant joyful prayer in view of your participation with the gospel. I'm offering this joyful prayer in view of your participation with the gospel. That's a key statement for Paul as he's seeking to explain why it is that he's offering this prayer, and it's because they're participants in the gospel. That's another way of saying because you believe. I offer prayer continually and with joy because you believe. You're a believer, and Paul is excited about that for the Philippians. He's encouraged, and he's continually praying for them because they're participants in the gospel with him. They are believers. But not only have they expressed belief in one point in time over the course of their faith, but he actually points out the continuity of their belief in this next expression. He says, you have participated in the gospel from the first day until now. In other words, Paul is indicating their endurance in that statement. They didn't just believe once and then turn away. They have continued in their belief. They've continued in their participation of the gospel from the first day until now. So Paul is offering this constant, joyful prayer because they are fellow participants in the gospel. And so what we see in these first two verses here is Paul indicating the first reason why it is that he prays for them. Okay, this is kind of his first reason here, and it's because of their enduring belief. Paul is first offering constant joyful prayer because of their enduring belief. You are participants of the gospel from the first day until now. He makes that clear in verse 5, and he continues in that in verse 6 as he gives a for statement. We know these are always helpful for us to understand some of the purposes with which Paul is writing. He says, why? Why am I doing this? For I am confident of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you will perfect it until the day to come, until the day of Christ Jesus. He expresses confidence. What is he expressing confidence in? The statement is that he who began a work in you will perfect it until the day of Christ Jesus. Now, he's already spoken of endurance that we spoke of in verse 5. And I think what he's doing in this next verse is he's expounding on that endurance. He says, I'm confident that he who began a good work in you. Who is that? Who is the individual that began a good work in the Philippians? Well, it's not Paul. He's referring specifically to God. He's saying God is the one who began a good work in you, and he's expressing confidence that God who began that work will perfect it. Another way of saying that is complete, or that he will finish that good work. And he's going to perfect that, and he's going to complete that until the day of Christ Jesus. So up in verse 5, Paul was speaking of endurance. And in verse 6, what we see is he's actually expounding on that endurance. He's saying that I'm confident that God is going to continue to cause you to endure. So he's bringing this endurance down in verse 6. And he's saying, you're enduring, but not because of you, but because of God. God is the one who is causing you to endure. God is the one who began this work, which reflects immediately what he said in verse 5. He said, you're participants in the gospel from the first day. And then here he says, he who began that work, that work is what began on the first day. So you are enduring, and Paul's thankful for that, but he actually ties their endurance to the work of God. He's the one who began it in you, and he's the one who will perfect it. Paul's excited that they've remained faithful until now in verse 5, but he's confident that they're going to remain faithful until the day of Christ in verse 6. You see that? These two untils. I know my script is getting messy here, but I hope you're seeing these connections here. Paul is offering constant, joyful prayer for the Philippians because they're going to endure till the very end. They're going to endure till the very end, not because of anything that they have in them, but because of the faithfulness of God. He's the one who began this work, and he's the one who will complete this work. So that's his first reason. His first reason that he offers constant joyful prayer is because of their enduring belief. But there's another reason indicated in this text as to why Paul is offering this constant and joyful prayer. And that's indicated in the last two verses, in verses 7 and 8. Paul writes, for it's only right for me to feel this way about you all, because I have you in my heart, since both in my imprisonment and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel, you all are partakers of grace with me. For God is my witness, how I long for you all with affection with the affection of Christ. So this section right here gives us a second reason. We're answering the question why. It gives us a second reason for Paul's constant and joyful prayer for the Philippians. Again, he gives an explanatory phrase here. We've seen this before. He says, I'm doing this for. Why am I continually offering this? For, here's the reason. Let me give you the cause. He says, it's only right for me to feel this way about you all. Why do I feel this way about you all? Joyful and constant prayer, because I have you in my heart. All right? So there you start to get a glimpse into this second reason. He's saying, I'm doing this because I have you in my heart. There's this friendship there's this love, there's this affection that Paul has for the Philippians. Why does he have it? He continues to give us more explanatory phrases. Why do I have you in my heart? Since, or because, both in my imprisonment and in the defense and in the confirmation of the gospel. In other words, what Paul's saying right there is that's all of Paul's ministry. All right? In all of Paul's ministry, both whether it's imprisonment or defense or confirmation of the gospel, Paul says, you are all partakers with me. You are all partakers of grace with me. Okay. So I have you in my heart. No matter what I've gone through, you are partakers of grace with me. That's another way. Partakers is another way of saying partners. He's saying you're with me. You're in my heart. You're alongside of me in this journey. And so he says in verse 8, God is my witness. I long for you. I long for you with the affection of Christ. That word long indicates a desperate desire. I have a desperate desire for you. I have the affection of Christ for you. And those three statements, I have you in my heart, you're all partakers of grace with me, I long for you all with the affection of Christ Jesus, demonstrate this second reason that Paul is offering this constant and joyful prayer. And that is because of an affectionate partnership. An affectionate partnership. Paul says, you're with me, and I love you all because you have continued in the faith, which ultimately is the work of God. I long for you all with the affection of Christ Jesus. I love you. I miss you. I want to be joined with you. But in the meantime, I'm offering constant and joyful prayer because I'm so encouraged by what I've seen with you. So Paul offers constant and joyful prayer for two reasons: because of enduring belief of the Philippians, and because of their affectionate partnership with him in the gospel. There's a lot of helpful things in here. I think this is a timely text for us to kick off our study with. Paul is clearly someone who prays for those for other Christians, those other Christians that he has a relationship with, and I think there's an encouragement there for us. I would encourage you guys, as we're kind of separated by the unique circumstances of the day, to be praying for each other. We're going to see a particular application of that in the text that we're going to study tomorrow, where Paul actually gives his prayer. He essentially prays through the text to God for the Philippians. But we're going to find that encouragement already today. Pray for each other. Pray for each other. I also think it's encouraging in this text to notice that Paul longs for the Philippians. He misses them. He loves them. He enjoys time with them. And I think it's instructive for us. There's some difficulty in these times, certainly, but it's okay to long for each other, to want to spend it. It's okay to miss each other. And we want to do everything we can to continue to remain united in these strange times. But long for each other, love each other, because we are fellow partakers of the gospel. There should be a sanctified missing of one another. And Paul certainly has that when he can't spend time with believers. And I think that should be true for us as well. And then let me give you one more, and that is partner together. That doesn't look good, sorry. Partner together in the gospel. Partner together in the gospel. Paul clearly views the Philippians as partners with him. They're praying for him. He's praying for them. They have been partakers with him no matter what is going on in his ministry. And we're going to find out later in the book of Philippians that part of that has been the fact that they have sent him financial gifts to help sustain his ministry. But there's something instructive here for us in this text, and that's that we are to be partners together in the gospel, enabling each other's taking of the gospel to the world, praying for each other as we do that, holding each other accountable to do that. So I think there's a lot that's instructive in these verses. I hope that these are encouraging for you. We need to be praying for each other, longing for each other, and partnering together in the gospel. So that's Philippians 1, verses 3 through 8. We're going to pick up tomorrow in verses 9 through 11 as Paul continues these prayers that he has for the Philippians. And I think we'll find some more instruction in how we can be praying for one another in our time in the text tomorrow. So I hope that was helpful for you. We will see you tomorrow morning.